I'm Lisandra Devaca, and I'm here with my Heritage Spanish teacher, Senora Fimbres, and we're here to talk about news and fact-checking.
Hi, Lisandra. I'm happy to be here with you. It will be fun.
How do you get your news?
Well, for my news, I generally read online newspapers, and I also use TV news. How about you? How do you get your news?
I get a lot of my news off of social media. Whatever my friends are reposting, I tend to look at that, even if it's just looking into what they have to say. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the time at home, I do have my parents playing the news just in the background. Mm-hmm. And if something does sound interesting, I'll sit and listen. So what makes you stop and ask yourself, is this true or is this a reliable resource?
Well, definitely if it is something that has a lot of opinions or using very exaggerated language, or has very, very few text and a lot of images, is something that makes me think the reliability.
I do try to look at certain news outlets, and not even just certain political parties that run each news outlet, but a variety to ensure that I'm getting the right information.
Mm-hmm. The fact that we can go and vote doesn't guarantee that you are going to go and vote for what is more convenient for the whole society. So only a person that takes the responsibility to fact check and make sure that what he or she is hearing, or what she's hearing or voting for is exactly what is going to happen. For that, another thing that is very important is the role of education in a democracy. If you have educated people that are able to discern if what they're hearing is logical or illogical, and so when to go and find out if that is true or not. So yes, it's very important fact-checking, but it's very important in order to be able to do so that we have an educated population. And I can tell because Mexico, my original, my birthplace, is a democracy, but we sometimes have voted for things that are not the most convenient for most of us. And I think that happens also here in the US, especially with all this information that is possible because of how digital and widespread and connected we are. We are in a danger of not being a real democracy if we are not able to identify the real facts.
I agree. I think that since we have this almost like a privilege to vote, it's very important to make sure that you're fact-checking what each candidate is saying and making sure that they're not saying that just to win over a vote, and instead making sure that they're going to act upon that promise that they're making.
Especially if something is like very, very direct cause and effect, that should turn on a red light, because things are generally more complex. It's not that like something causes this, but there are different factors. So that's a red flag. And also, is, as you mentioned, it's a right, but it's also a responsibility to vote informed.
So we come from different generations. What do you think is some things that we can both learn from each other when it comes to fact-checking?
Well, one of the things that I have learned from talking to you and also teaching people your age is how you get information, and how skillful you are with the digital devices that we have. Because I use computers, I use my phone, etc., but I don't use social media as much as you do. So the literacy that you have regarding this issue is different from mine. While, for example, in my case, I may bring some more experience to your generation. And in the same way, I would like to ask you, what is what you have learned from my generation or older generations regarding fact-checking and getting informed?
I think specifically in this class, you have taught us that since you have lived through so many different of these events, mm-hmm. and you kind of know what it's like to experience things firsthand, and also hearing things on different websites, it's very important to fact check and take into accountability what kind of resources you're looking at and what kind of information you're getting from specific resources. Mm-hmm. And you have taught the importance of fact checking and making sure that resources are reliable, while also having firsthand encounters or even stories that you tell us And also coming hand in hand with being able to tie that to fact checking and making sure that resources that you look at aren't coming from either a biased standpoint or are completely made up, because you have told us exactly how if something so big was to happen and it wasn't covered on different news outlets, no matter their political party, it probably didn't happen. And that's something that I do think about a lot, and I have taken into accountability because you have taught us that in specifically this class. Thank you, Senora Fimbres, for having this conversation with me. We've touched base on fact-checking before, but I'm glad we had an in-depth conversation.
I agree. It's been a pleasure to be here talking with you about this issue, and I hope we have more opportunities in the future.